All right. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Let There Be Talk. It is Monday, October 28th. Welcome aboard, everybody. Today is a very special day. Very special day indeed. It is episode number 500. 500. I cannot believe I've been doing this for 8 years, 500 episodes. It's funny because I sat there and I thought, holy shit, man, it's a lot of pressure of who am I going to get for number 500? I got to get a big guest. I got to do something. And then at the end of the day, I thought, no matter who I had, even if it was just me talking, I felt like I've accomplished something. I've been doing something for 8 years, 500 episodes. This thing is not an easy thing to do. Of course, a lot of you know I have no one booking the guests for me. I don't have an assistant. I don't have an agent or a publicist calling me saying, hey, do you want such and such on? It's me every week, pounding on doors, calling people, meeting people, trying to get people on the podcast. It's a brutal gig, but I've enjoyed the ride the whole time. It is, I think the best thing about it is the emails that I get from a lot of people out there, or the tweets or the Instagram love, where they say, hey, man, I love your show. Or when I just run into somebody at an airport or a store or something, and they say they dig the show. That's enough for me, I'm just glad everybody digs it. It's a lot of work, and I didn't know how to do it when I started. I didn't know how to podcast. I didn't know how to edit. I talked to Ari Shafir. He gave me a quick 20-minute pointer like 8 years ago. I went home and I just tried doing it. A lot of trial and error, a lot of fail. But here we are. And, if you want to do something, yeah, you're probably going to fail. But if you don't, hey, whatever. You get to 500. I don't know what I'm saying, because I'm kind of blown away, I guess, about doing something this long. This and comedy are all I love. I love stand-up. I love doing the podcast. And I'm just so happy that I have something at 53 years old that I love to do. And I said it 100 times, man. If you want to do something, go do it. Yeah, don't be afraid to fail. If you fail, oh well. At least you did it. I've been doing this thing. It's just insane. I've been doing it on West Coast, East Coast. I've recorded episodes in trains, Ubers. Where else? Parks. Different apartments I've had. Horrible, shitty apartments, great apartments. I've been using the same equipment the entire 8 years. Never broke down. Shout out to Zoom with this fucking H4n. Just doing thousands of hours and never failing me. Except one time when I lost an episode because the thing came unplugged. But I learned real quick, don't record without batteries as a backup. I want to give a big shout out to some of the great podcasts out there that have definitely inspired me over the years. The one that got it all going for me, Mr. Mark Maron, WTF. What a great show. Bill Burr's Monday Morning Podcast, fantastic. Rogan Experience, unbelievable. Those are some of the podcasts that I looked at and thought, I want to put out an excellent show. These guys do it great. I want to try to strive for that. It's hard to podcast. A lot of people ask me advice. What do you do? The only thing I could say is consistency. Make sure that thing's out every week. That is the number one thing to do when you're doing a podcast. Here's some shout outs to some of the great guests I've had over the years that I could not believe I got to talk to. Henry Rollins, 4 hours, unbelievable. Omar and Cedric at the drive-in and the Mars Volta. And my man Cedric Bixler that did coin the phrase, Kiss is the gateway drug to rock and roll. I love that. I quote it many, many times. Nikki Sixx, unbelievable to talk to Mr. Nikki Sixx. We've become great, great friends, and I'll never forget that day. Duff McKagan, two-time, let there be talker. That was insane. Chris Goss, one of the great, great, great rock and rollers, Chris Goss. Bill Paxton, rest in peace. I miss you still to this day, and my good friend Brody Stevens, rest in peace. I miss you every day, both you guys, and I love you. Mark Lanigan and all of the Mastodon guys. Primus, the great Greg Dooley, Brad Wilk, Ben Montench, Neil Sean, Greg Raleigh, all of Rival Sons. I love all you guys. I love all the episodes I've ever done. I never put somebody on here that I'm not interested in. I've been offered tons of guests from record companies. How about this band? How about these? If I'm not into it, it's not going to be on here. Also, I've enjoyed all the amazing people I've met for the handmade episodes. Those are some of my favorite episodes. Blaine Haverson at Maidworn, Brian the Bootmaker, Bo Gorey at LA Watchworks, Clip Speakers, Billy Rowe and Rock and Roll Relics, Rod Emery, Kia, my man Kia at Self Edge. And I want to thank all the early sponsors. The early ones, Earthquaker, Good Art, both great. And the amazing El Cajon Harley, who was a sponsor, I think, for over a year. And some great friends out there. Big love for Joey DeBono, my man Fletch, Jason Bernard. Thank you, brother, for hooking up the guest I have today, Mr. Paul Stanley. Holy shit. Paul Stanley is the guest today. Oh, I don't even need to really even talk about what this means to me, but I'll tell you, I saw Kiss in 1979 at the Cow Palace on the Dynasty Tour, and it completely changed my life, and probably the reason I'm still alive and didn't go down some crazy other road. Thank God. Paul Stanley is here today, and I cannot thank him enough for inviting me over to his house to do a podcast. At this point in his career, you think he needs to do a fucking podcast? No, he doesn't need to do shit. He is a legend. Rock and Roll Hall of Famer, a killer songwriter, over 100 million records sold, an original king of rock and roll, man, the Star Child himself. God, I'm still kind of fried right now. Ever since I did the interview, I've just been on this run, and I've just been trying to take it in of like, oh my God, Paul Stanley. Oh, man. Anyway, I'll get to him in a minute here. Before I do, I just want to give a shout out to some Patreoners. The King Patreoner himself, Mark Brunot. He really helps this machine keep going. I love you, Mark Brunot, Mr. Australia yourself, the king of the DELRAISERS. Marcus, brand new Patreoner. Battle Rap Resume. Daniel Policy. Troy Pallenberg. Raymond Hosta. Danny Prokop. Brand new Patreoners. And I also want to give a shout out to my man Steve McDonald. Great Patreon, great friend. A couple great tour dates coming in here. Terrapin Station in Marin County. The Phil Lesh's Club. I'm doing that. They've never done comedy. We're trying it. November 21st. I'm going to be in Detroit and Omaha November 7th, 8th, and 9th with Joey Diaz. Check that out. Love you, Joey Diaz. big shout out to Joey Diaz and the Church of What's Happening. A lot of you fans have found this podcast from the church, and I got to tell you, I've been on the church more than any other podcast besides mine, and those have been some absolute epic episodes. So thank you, Joey Diaz, from the bottom of my heart. I absolutely love you and have the best time with you out on the road. Joey and I will be in San Francisco on December 28th at the Palace of Fine Arts. All the tour dates are on DeanDelray.com. Let's get into it right now, man. I don't know. Sorry, the intro is kind of long, but I just felt like I just had to shoot the shit a little bit. Don't forget to catch me on Lights Out tonight on Comedy Central. David Spade's show, Lights Out. It'll be me, Kevin Nealon, and David Spade shooting the shit and hopefully being funny. I love all you. Love you all. Keep the candles lit. Here he is, the absolute legend, number 500, Mr. Paul Stanley. All right, here we are. This is episode number 500, and what a dream guest right now. This is pretty insane. I can't believe it. Introduce yourself.
My name is Stevie Nicks, and I'm in Fleetwood Mac.
Stevie Nicks, can't believe I got you.
For those of you who can't see me, it's Paul Stanley.
I can't even believe it, dude. It's I look at you and I think back to basically, I think Kiss is really the reason that I'm still alive and here, because without Kiss and music, I don't know what would have happened to me. But years ago, I think it's 40 years ago now, I saw the Dynasty tour and my life changed. And I learned so much from Kiss. It's crazy, not just music, but work ethic, grind, and a lot of fuck you if you don't like this. I'm still doing it. I learned everything from Kiss.
It's really interesting how we have managed, without really being premeditated in doing it, to influence a lot of people, impact a lot of people by not trying. I think the truth is that you lead by example. And when people see you living a certain way, and we do that as parents too, hopefully, it's not really what you say, it's what you do. And although you can't be in Kiss and you may not look like Kiss, you can feel like Kiss. And that comes from a sense of self-empowerment and the idea of following what you think is right and wrong and fighting for what you believe in. So it's always interesting to speak to people who've been impacted in ways outside of music, people who have gone on to become professionals, people who have gotten off substance abuse, people who've made a life for themselves outside of some early mistakes. It's humbling. It's totally humbling.
It's insane. I have done 500 episodes, and I always open up the show when it's a musician. I say, what got you into music? And I had a guy on early on, Cedric Bixler, who plays in a band called the Mars Volta and also at the Drive-In. And he said, Kiss is the gateway drug to rock and roll. That's the gateway to rock and roll. And it was amazing that he said that. He coined it because everybody that was from late 60s, early 70s born was Kiss. And right before that is Zeppelin. So it was either Kiss or Zeppelin every episode I've done.
It's very interesting. Again, it's rarefied air to be mentioned in those terms. Certainly, I remember early on with the band when people were saying, and I found it amusing, who's better, Led Zeppelin or Kiss? I went, Led Zeppelin, come on. But I believe that somehow Kiss just found its way into people's psyche And if it wasn't necessarily the music, there was something about what we were doing culturally, visually, that struck a nerve with people. And that's why I think it's always interesting to see how we have influenced people outside of the musical sphere. It's always interesting to me. I say this and no false modesty. Rock bands make music. Phenomenons impact society. And although certainly we never set out with that in mind, truth be told, we have found a way to impact so many people. And just in terms of music, ask Garth Brooks. The diversity where people somehow channeled or found something in the music that inspired them is terrific. It's incredibly gratifying and far beyond anything I ever expected.
I know Zeppelin's a big band with you, and it's a huge band with me. I pretty much have every show on CD, all the bootlegs and everything. When was the first time that you saw Zeppelin?
I saw Zeppelin in, I think it was August of 68 or 69.
First record.
Yeah, between the first and second. And they were actually playing What Is and What Should Never Be, a couple of those tracks. And Jimmy had his bow, and they were panning his guitar left and right so he could point and it would go one direction. I was just absolutely blown away. To this day, I've never seen anything that was that perfect, not just in terms of the synchronicity and the fact that everybody was so much on the same playing field. It was the sexual energy that was coming off the stage, the flamboyance, the cocksure attitude. They backed it up, and I think they knew how great they were, and I was just, first of all, the band was spectacular and played. I won't use any profanity, but they played.
You can.
They played tighter than a something. Anyway,
you can use profanity.
That's all right. I'm a gentleman.
Yeah.
So they were amazing, and Robert Plant was singing like something from another planet. I mean, he was hitting notes effortlessly, and there was such bravado in everything they were doing. It just blew me away. I could go on for this whole podcast about that and what Zeppelin meant to me over the years, and Jimmy, and the whole thing is it's amazing to have been a young kid seeing Zeppelin and then play London and have Jimmy watching us.
Whoa.
So life is amazing. Life is, life can surprise everybody. You just got to hang around long enough to be surprised.
I feel the same way. Look, I waited in line all night outside to get a ticket to see it, and on the Dynasty tour, and here I am interviewing you.
But that's the beauty of life. It shouldn't be lost on you. People can become jaded, but on its worst day, life's a miracle. I mean, look, I've had some awful days, but it sure beats the alternative. And what happens is what you make it.
You're right. It's funny because I've interviewed tons of people, but all night last night I was like just thinking about it, going on like, wow, I'm about to talk to Paul Stanley. It's like a giant deal to me. I never got jaded. After all these years, I still flip out on stuff. Like when I first met you at the pizza place, I was like, I usually wouldn't go like, oh, that's such and such, but I look and I go, hey, that's Paul Stanley over there. Wow.
And he's chewing with his mouth open, for God's sake. He's got spinach in his teeth.
When did Page come see you guys? What era?
Jimmy saw us, I think it was the tour before last. And subsequent to that, we've had dinner and gone, out for tea and lunch. And there's an old adage that you should be weary of meeting your heroes.
Yep.
And the people you look up to, because quite frankly, a lot of them are assholes. Jimmy's the complete opposite, and he lives and breathes music, and he's a terrific guy, and I would argue the most important and influential guitar player, not only in terms of playing, but in terms of vision. Jimmy's Beethoven. It's what he created was symphonic. It's not as simple as a guitar, bass, and drums and a singer. What he did on those records was multi-layered and a tapestry of sorts. So he's painted with an amazing brush and amazing palette of colors. So he's right up there at the top for me.
Same here. I really realized it recently when I was at the Met to see the guitar exhibits. And I walked around in there for a couple hours, and it was kind of towards the end of the exhibit, so it was light attendance, which was nice. And I looked at, there was your guitar, the Iceman, the cracked glass one. There's Eddie Van Halen's guitar. There's Neil Young's Carina V. There's Jerry Garcia's Wolf and Tiger. And then there's Jimmy's 59 Paul.
Look, that is the holy grail. I mean, that guitar, I will argue, is the most valuable guitar on earth. And well, it should be. That is the hammer of the gods.
It really is. And it made me realize that as much as I love guitars, and I know you do, because you've had, tons of different types, there was something about where he gets this guitar from Joe Walsh and he just says, this is it. And it becomes his crescent wrench, screwdriver, pliers, everything for the history of his playing. He played that guitar every gig.
Well, it's interesting because it all pretty much grew out of the John Mayall Beano album, where Clapton had a sunburst, and that seemed to start the wave with Bloomfield and Clapton and Beck and Page. Everybody suddenly was looking for the magic, and that guitar seemed to symbolize a certain commitment to the blues or what have you. So, but for me, that guitar is just synonymous with Jimmy Page. Although a lot of iconic guitar players have played it, that is his guitar. Absolutely.
Do you remember when you bought your first 59? I remember talking to Albert at Guitars R Us many years ago, and I was obsessed with the 59, still am. And he said, he at the time, I think he had about 15 of them, because back in the day, people would just go, here, take this clunker, I want a Charvel. And he said, and I have a picture of it here, that you had the all-time best flame top that he had ever touched, played, seen. And it was.
And right now I'm crying on the microphone. Go ahead.
It was the lightest, too. And when you look at it in this book I have, The Beauty of the Burst, it's one of the most incredible guitars I ever saw. Was that the first 59 you ever bought?
I had a 58, which was the first one that I bought. And it was a great, great guitar. And then it was great because at that point you could put out feelers around the country when you were touring, and people would show up at the arenas with guitars. And but in Los Angeles, somebody told me about somebody who had a 59 for sale, and he brought it over to the hotel I was staying at on Burton Way. And I looked at the guitar, and it was gorgeous. It really was a beautiful, beautiful guitar, and it played terrifically. And then came the question, the two words, how much?
Yeah.
And it's always relative, and it's so interesting how exponentially they have gone up in value. But at that point, I believe that my 58 had cost me $2,800. That guitar is arguably worth about $300,000 or $400,000 today. Somewhere between $200,000 and $400,000. So I believe that the guitar, I believe it was $10,000.
What year are we talking?
77, 78.
Wow.
And it was either 5 or 10, but it was outrageous to me. It was just like, oh, come on. I've never spent that much money in my life.
Especially then.
Yeah.
They're still like, I think then they're still like $2,000.
Yeah. Well, they were more depending upon, the quality and the condition. I wound up buying it, and I had a really great collection of really pristine examples of every guitar that I wanted. And I had a case built in my house, my apartment, and they all hung on piano wire with a light above them in a glass case. And I still have quite a few photos. At some point, I just I don't know. I can sometimes reach a point with things that I've collected where I've had enough. Maybe it serves its purpose, or I accomplished the goal. The goal was to have all these great guitars. And then I kind of wanted to move on, which was kind of crazy. So I sold, I think it was 9 guitars. And I sold the 9 guitars for $50,000 and made a profit. And that collection today arguably is worth probably $2.5 million. But I did pretty well.
Yeah.
I did okay.
Yeah, and who knew? Who knew that it was going to go crazy like this?
You have to put everything in perspective. In the scheme of things, all has turned out well. But I guess in some ways, just hearing people talk about a guitar that's now known as the Stanley Burst,
right?
It's very cool.
Absolutely. Do you know where that guitar is now?
I have an idea, although he won't confirm it. But yes, I'm pretty sure that the person who initially bought it still has it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Was it a brokered deal, or was it a dude that you knew?
Back then, the sale of those guitars was very informal. It was somebody I knew, and he didn't even have enough cash, so he went in with another guy. They came over to the house. I counted out $50,000, and they took the guitars. And he's made quite a career for himself as a broker, and very well known, and deals with all of the. Is
it Drew Belzner?
No.
Oh, gotcha.
Drew Berlin?
Drew Berlin. Yeah, sorry.
No.
The Burst Brothers.
Yeah. Drew, I know well. Drew's a great guy, and but no, this is another one of the guys.
Right. At what point, I remember I was a kid, and I went into a music store in Fresno, and there it was. I believe it was like 78, maybe 79. Maybe 80, the Iceman, the original black Iceman with the abalone inlay, was hanging there next to the George Benson. And I looked at both of those, and they blew my mind. That was a time when Ibanez quality was unbelievable. They had the lawsuit era that was phenomenal. And then your guitar comes out. I get a job at Foster Freeze flipping burgers. I'm buying one. I get the first check. I'm like, I'm never going to get there. I have $3.35 an hour after taxes or whatever. I'm not going to get it. Still to this day wanted it. How did the Iceman come together? I always wanted to know, did you design that, the actual shape of the body, or was it around?
Here's the full story. There was a guitar called an Iceman, and that's not my guitar. My guitar was a PS10.
Right.
I saw the shape of the guitar. It was a fairly inexpensive guitar that Ibanez had with a single pickup and a clicking tone selector, not unlike on a ES345 or whatever, 355. But the guitar itself was not a great guitar, but I did like the shape. And I met with Ibanez, Hoshino was the company. I met with them when I was in Japan. And they were turning out, as you said, really great guitars. I had to say to them, you make great guitars, but you don't know why. I think they were great at copying, but didn't give much thought to why certain things worked. I had one of the Ibanez Les Pauls, and it was just a killer guitar. And there were other companies. There was Greco was another company, Tokai, and they were making better Les Pauls than Gibson was making. But in any case, I met with them, said, this is a great shape. Let's make a great guitar. And in essence, what I did was take all the features of my Gibson guitars that I loved and transferred them. If you play one of the PS10s, it's virtually another brand's guitar. The specs were taken from a few of the guitars that I really liked. So I remember the original ones were neck through the body, and they were mahogany and with a maple cap on them. And it was all new to them in terms of what I wanted to do. And ebony fingerboard and these wide frets and a half bone, half brass nut, all kinds of things that most people who are listening right now are going out to get a sandwich while I talk about this.
No, people get into that stuff. It's crazy.
But there was a nut job, so I thought at the time, who was winding pickups. I went to meet a guy who had a winding machine and was winding pickups, and it was like, well, why are you winding pickups? Guitars come with pickups. But Larry DiMarzio knew more than I did.
Oh,
and
man.
In any case, the guitars wound up with DiMarzio pickups, and they were great. And to this day, they're my number one choice in terms of over the years. Anything I've had to do with different companies has always been based on that guitar.
Yeah. I only wanted to dive into the guitar a bit in the show because I think that some people don't even realize what a great guitar player you are, as far as, because when you're seeing Paul, it's like, holy shit, this guy's, he's dancing, he's singing, he's playing guitar, he's killing it. But when you really listen to the records and look at over the years all the credits, you're like, oh, well, he played all the guitar on this one, which means the leads. Oh, he played bass on this, like you played bass on I Was Made for Loving You.
Well, I actually played bass on I Was Made for Loving You. That is Gene.
Oh, is it?
Yes, and Gene, by the way, is unfortunately one of the most underrated bass players because all the other stuff he does and his personality tends to eclipse or sabotage the fact that he's a phenomenal bass player. And any, rock bass player worth his salt will tell you that that's the case. He's just terrific. He was a big fan of Ron Wood when Ronnie was playing bass, and Jack Bruce and Felix Pappalardi and McCartney. He's got great roots, and so he played bass on that. I played bass on Love Gun. Love Gun and Tears Are Falling, and
great song.
Can't remember what else, but I understandably sometimes the show and the razzle dazzle, if not eclipses, tends to somewhat overshadow sometimes what else is going on. But I never had aspirations to be the lead player. I always was the person who thought that you could make a life of trying to be a great rhythm player, and that some people just missed the point when they thought that rhythm playing was what you do before you learn to play lead. Hence, a lot of lead players are not particularly good rhythm players.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I mean, look at some of the greatest rhythm players there are. James Hetfield, his right hand is insane. Malcolm Young. There's no one can lock like that guy. And then you, because what people don't understand is how it's already hard to sing and it's already hard to learn an instrument. But to do them both and just to be able to cancel out what you're doing, not just stare at the fretboard, you're up there just putting on a full show and killing it on rhythm.
Well, I think the key word there is rhythm. It's all in your right hand. And when my son started playing guitar, I said to him, it's all in your right hand. Yes, your left is important. It mutes and how it presses, but the right hand is what really makes for great players, whether it's electric or acoustic. Look, Richie Havens was an amazing guitar player. He played a big Guild acoustic guitar, and his right hand was ridiculous. And I was more intrigued with that than some of the rock contemporaries at the time. Pete Townshend's the same thing. That right hand is just crazy.
Yeah.
So that's where the rhythm comes from.
It's wild, all the different guitars you had. I was going through them. I remember them all. Firebird 1, V, Explorer. You get to the Iceman. And then I was watching some footage last night, 88, Steinberger. I was like, wow.
That looked like, I should know better. What's that game that...
Cricket?
Yes.
It looked like a cricket bat.
Looks like a cricket bat. I mean, it's embarrassing, but the reason I was playing those guitars was my back was bad. I'd screwed up my back, so I wanted something as light as possible. But it wasn't the most rock and roll looking guitar around. Certainly, it would be better on the cricket field.
Yeah. I saw Kiss on every tour since Dynasty, and I didn't even remember the Steinberger era. I was like, oh, wow. But those things were pretty cool when they came out. It was like, wow.
Well, look, you have to live with your baby pictures, and I have a closet full of baby pictures. Whether it's me with as much makeup as my mom used to wear, and going, hey, look at these feathered earrings, aren't these cool? Or wearing a lime green robe with shoulder pads on stage. Look, but I think that's part of what's cool.
Oh, I love it.
Is tripping over your own feet and being able to look back at it at some other time. And everything that I've done got me here. So I look upon all that pretty fondly.
You're 67, and you are fantastic. I mean, it is incredible. When I walked in here today, I've seen you over the last couple of years in person, but it's just like, God, this guy looks great. And it's so scary as I get older. Like my neck's messed up now and stuff like that. And I think about you being in Kiss all those years. It's exact to being in the NFL.
Totally.
You got 3 hip replacements. You had vocal surgery. Your ears are probably fried.
Funny that a few of my friends are sports doctors, and all of them will say, look, all your injuries are sports injuries, and there's no 60-plus-year-old football players or basketball players. I just say thank God for modern medicine, and I've had both my knees. I've torn the meniscus in both my knees. I actually had one hip replacement, and then they revised it a few months later. But hey, it's still a big piece of titanium and ceramic, and tore both my rotator cuffs, had them fixed, popped my bicep tendon.
Oh.
But it's amazing what they can do today. But the rest is up to you. Look, they can repair you, but if the car's been abused, it's that much harder to get it back running. So I've never thought that there was any glamour in being a dead rock star or a inebriated or a out of control cartoon of what a journalist or someone may think that a rock star should be. If it's so cool, then they should do it. But the idea of getting credibility by dancing with death, no, not for me.
Yeah, I mean, I did some fierce partying back in the day, and I was in a band. And as I read your book, which, by the way, your first book is probably one I feel so underrated. I feel everyone should read this book. It's like, wow. I mean, it's brutal. You were laying it all out there. And one thing that really stuck with me is there's nothing worse than being around people on cocaine when you're completely clean. That's got to make you crazy.
Well, the interesting thing about drugs is that the reason people want you to get high with them is because they're not comfortable getting high by themselves. And the reason why you lose friends when you stop doing drugs is because people are just uncomfortable with you being more together than them. I saw it in my teens, and I mean, to be sharp and focused and know what's going on, and see some idiot who thinks he knows what's going on. You know, when you say to somebody, listen, you're just saying that because you're high. No, man, I know exactly. You know, I mean, we've all had those kind of discussions, and the sooner we wise up, the better.
Yeah. When you put that book out, did you send Gene a copy before it came out and let him read it? I mean, what was that like to be face to face? Because everything's out there. You put it all out there on the line, and the guys are looking at it. And of course, everybody's going to come back like, that's not what happened. This is what happened. Everybody has their own thing. But was it strange between you and Gene after the book came out?
No, Gene has always been very accepting. And we've only gotten closer and closer over time, which is just terrific. I mean, I said things in the book that I felt were true. And I would stand by what I said, but it doesn't negate that in the scheme of things, he's been a terrific partner. He's a brother, and he's family. And certainly there were things that I spoke about in the book that aren't true anymore, but they were to me at some point. And that book was really my overview of my life. And I really didn't say anything to hurt anyone. And I didn't want to throw anybody under the bus. There were a few people who walked under the bus. I didn't have to throw them. But yeah, I think Gene has always respected that I have my own perspective. And again, I couldn't be closer to him than I am now.
For real?
Totally. I mean, I speak to him often, and I have to say, look, it would be crazy and sad to go through what we've done together and what we've accomplished and have ill will or animosity. If anything, the two of us look at each other and go, wow, in those moments of candor, or when we're just talking to each other or texting each other, there are those texts where it's like, wow, look what we did, look what we've done. So anybody who thinks otherwise is sadly mistaken. We are our family. His family is my family. Shannon, I've known Shannon probably 35 plus years. Nick and Sophie are I feel like their uncle. And look, when Evan was born, first person in the room to see him was Gene.
No,
okay?
That's cool.
So we are very, very, even when things have been tough or there's been tensions in the past, and not in the near past, we always were family. When we had our big earthquake in the 90s, I wasn't talking to Gene at the time.
Is that right?
Yeah. And as soon as the ground stopped shaking, I called him, said, "Are you okay?" He said, "Yeah." And then we kept not talking to each other. But the most important thing was making sure he was okay.
Oh.
So long answer to a short question. But no, Gene and I, I'm very, very lucky to have him. And I don't necessarily agree with everything he does, but does anybody?
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, who thought when you first meet Gene that we, or you guys, and would be here today as a band still? So, of course, you're going to slowly, over the years, grow into different people.
Totally. And but we've been through births and deaths and marriages and all kinds of things. And to share that, we started out as teens living at home. I've known him that long. So, again, I'm blessed, and with that book, I thought that there were some things I needed to not get off my chest, but to put into writing. Sometimes things become real, and when they're in black and white, and I needed to put some things down according to my perspective. But if you look at Backstage Pass, my second book, the very last thing in the book is basically a salute to Gene, that if I didn't appreciate him, then I don't deserve to know him. I mean, we've been through so much together. So there you have it.
I remember specifically, I had worked at the Stone Omni. I booked you twice, me and my partner Jimmy. We had you on the solo tour in '89.
Mm-hmm.
I was the guy there. And then '92 on the Revenge tour at the Stone.
Mm-hmm.
And I still remember it to this day. Omni, Oakland, shitty nightclub. Here's Paul Stanley absolutely murdering it with this crushing set list. And mid-set, here comes I Still Love You. And it floored me. It really comes down to the songs. Once the makeup was off, the fire was gone, and you're in a club, you're like, this band is like smoking in a club. And in '92, it really, on the Revenge tour, it really showed. Here's Kiss. Look at the muscle in here with no props.
Funny, because probably 2 days ago, Joe Bonamassa and I were talking about the same thing, that ultimately you got to have a song. All the flash in the world, you got to have songs. And Kiss was always born out of the idea of singing real songs as opposed to 20-minute jams or anything like that. I always felt schooled in Carole King and Jerry Goff and
Tapestry, masterpiece.
And Lieber and Stoller and Doc Pomus and Jeff Barry and Ellie Greenwich, all these people who wrote, Barry Mann, Cynthia Weil, all these people who wrote out of the Brill Building in New York, and were just craftsmen of songs, and understood the structure and the idea of a hook and getting there. So yeah, that's what Kiss has always been about. So there are songs that really stand out and stand the test of time. Hey, I was as much influenced by Smokey Robinson and Holland Dozier Holland as I was by anything else. So my roots go from rock to Philly soul, Motown, to Muscle Shoals, to Italian opera, to Verdi and Puccini. The more influences and the more you take in, the more depth you can bring to what you're doing. Now, that may sound strange to somebody who doesn't like Kiss. The idea of depth seems to contradict what a naysayer would think about Kiss, but the truth is that so much of the music that was out when we first came around and people thought was quote-unquote classic or credible or real rock, most of that stuff sounds ridiculous nowadays. And lo and behold, what we were doing sounds pretty timeless. So I think that the substance of what you do doesn't have to be worn on your sleeve. It's in there. It's if you make a great recipe, if you make great food, you may not, all the ingredients may not be apparent, but that's what makes good stuff. And I'd like to think that's what Kiss is all about, and what my writing is about is the things that I've absorbed over the years.
Yeah, they're fantastic songs. It's a straight turnsmith. I look at like the first record, you look at that, and most of the songs are still in the set list. To this day, it's just home run out of the gate, which is wild. And then the second record, if you look at like Hotter Than Hell, that's like all the songs the super fans love, that if you mixed in the set list, their head pops off. So it's like 2 records of like classics.
Well, I think that, I could be wrong, but I think that the first 3 albums came out in like 18 months or something crazy.
Yeah, every
like
6
that.
months.
Yeah. And that, it was a different mindset. We were determined to succeed, and when one album didn't do what we hoped, we just wrote another album. Oh, you don't like that? How about this one? Oh, you don't like this one? How about this one? So the first 3 albums, I will say the first album was easy to do because we had our lives to write it. Firehouse I wrote in high school. So, but the second album was, whoa, what do we do now? Now we got to come up with more songs, and by Dress to Kill, that was a tough one because Hotter Than Hell hadn't done what we had hoped, and we were in the midst of a tour, and we were told you need to go home and do another album. Well, that was that's daunting. When people wait for inspiration, you can wait your whole life. Not to be cold about it, but I remember talking to an accountant of mine back not too far from that time, and I said, I can't go write. I don't feel inspired. And he said, I'll show you your bills. You'll get inspired. And there, you know what? There's some truth to that. There is some truth.
Back against the wall, man.
Absolutely. A lot of times I would book studio time. I did that with my first solo album. I would book studio time without a song. And that would mean, guess what? By the time I get to the studio, you damn well better have a song. And I would work well under that kind of pressure. So I'm a big believer that it's great to wait for inspiration, but there is real talent in creating inspiration.
When Dress to Kill came out, that's 75, right around when Bruce Born to Run comes out. Were you into Born to Run and that kind of stuff that was going on, that Village and later the Troubadour, like early Eagles and all that stuff? Were you into that?
I've always been into good music. So I remember hearing Born to Run on the radio and just going, whoa, this is like some Jersey poet meets Phil Spector. So it was very cool. It was grand. It was big. It was symphonic. It owed a lot to Phil Spector, The Wall of Sound. The imagery of the writing, sure, that was beautiful and cinematic, but it was matched by the music, and I don't necessarily think perhaps some of the earlier Bruce stuff, the music matched the lyric. I think Born to Run really was a great marriage of great imagery and great production and music. So yeah, I was well aware of that, and certainly the Eagles were people who worked hard at their craft and took writing really seriously. Henley and Fry were shoulder to shoulder with Jackson Browne and J.D. Souther and people who really dedicated themselves to songwriting. So sure, you're missing out tremendously if you shut your ears to music because it's not the type of music you listen to or the type of music you want to play. I think it's important to, and not necessarily am I talking about the Eagles or Springsteen. I think it's really important to be able to say, that's not my taste, but it's great. Because you don't like something doesn't mean you can't appreciate the value in it. And I've always, to this day, I'll hear something on the radio and go, well, that's not really in my wheelhouse, but that's good. That's not going to be on my turntable or in my rotation, but that's good. That's good. And I think that's important. You shut yourself off and you limit your exposure to possibility.
Yeah, I never understood that. I don't just watch comedy films because I'm a comedian. I watch dramas, comedy, documentaries, everything. Should be the same with music.
Sure, because everything you absorb will manifest itself in one way or another.
I sat around last night and I really thought about what questions to ask you. I know you've been asked everything about Kiss, but there was always one thing that blew my mind with Kiss. And being a young kid, I always wondered this one thing. When you first go to the makeup, could each guy actually paint his face and didn't need another guy to help him? Because, as a kid, even when you're 12, 13, 14, you try to paint it and just horrible. I mean, out of the gate, the face makeup looked perfect all the time. Each guy was great at it?
Well, that's an interesting question. It was, I guess, trial by fire. And we didn't have much choice but to learn. And was it perfect in the beginning? No. But it was bearable. It was passable. And we learned as we went. Even if you look at some of the early photos, there's a first session. It wasn't even a session. I forget who took the photos.
Like when you're Bandit and stuff like that?
No, because that came after. The Bandit makeup actually came after we had done quite a bit with the Star makeup, and our record company president at the time kind of strong-armed me into changing it. And after a month, I said, screw this, and I went back. But there are photos. Actually, I think I put some of them in Backstage Pass from 23rd Street. We just did a photo shoot outside, and the makeup's not perfect. It was striking, and it was Kiss, but it took time. It took time to get it right.
It's wild to think about, because I could never do. I mean, I guess if you're in the band, you go, well, I got to practice doing this and get it together because this is my look.
Yeah, well, interesting how certainly I remember when Eric, who'd been in the band for so long off and on, and all of a sudden he was faced with putting on makeup. Well, he did it fine. I don't know. Maybe once you know that you have to, you do it. You don't have any choice, so you better get it right.
I'm such a shitty drawer or painter or anything. I could never do it. I would just have to get some stencils and then just airbrush it on. Like, there's me.
Whatever works.
Yeah. It's funny in the internet days now that we just have the internet at our hand and you could just dive into rabbit holes of Kiss. I had no idea that Kiss was starting to slip on the Dynasty tour at all.
Oh, my gosh.
Until I read your book, because to me, I see Kiss Dynasty at the Cow Palace. Sold out, insane. And then I start to read your book, you're like, dates started canceling. But the song was on the radio like crazy. I Was Made for Loving You. And you said you pretty much felt that you guys were done because you just looked at the hotel and saw a bunch of kids. You're like, we're done as far as this goes. But, at the time, to me, it seemed huge still.
It was waning. It was waning. It really wasn't until the next tour that
Creatures?
that the bottom completely fell out. I think that we had forsaken or gone beyond the essence of what people had loved about us in the beginning, and there was nothing dangerous about us anymore, and the music had become more tame. I think I tend to say, we were kind of gumming it, as opposed to, there were no teeth involved. It was, we were becoming complacent, and we were falling into that trap of being successful, having money, and wanting the approval of our contemporaries at the sake and at the expense of our fans. And we kind of got off at the wrong exit and kept going. Dynasty was not as big as the tour before it, and Creatures was just for the most part a nightmare. Just horrendous. And but that's also a time where you reevaluate and decide what's important to you. I never, ever considered leaving the band or breaking up the band, particularly because I've always stood by the belief that I won't allow anybody to tell me when my time is up or when my career is changing or anything about my life. So once there was a lot of adversity, it only made me that much more headstrong to prove those people wrong and to take away whatever power they thought they had. Because, look, there was no shortage of people that didn't like the band in the press, and those people needed a punch in the nose. They needed to see that they had no power over us.
Yeah, you're not going away.
Yeah, and in the face of great pain and disaster, we'll keep a brave face, and it wasn't easy. And again, look, when you have to decide why you're doing something. I do this and did it because I love doing it. And I can remember shows that were virtually empty. You know, playing an arena where...
I read that. I couldn't believe it.
Oh, yeah. You know, you pull into the parking lot and it looks like they left the lights on in the parking lot because there's no cars there. And you walk into the arena and you hear the echo of the opening act. So, but that's when you decide what do you do now? And when you're playing to, you know, a few thousand people instead of 18,000 or whatever, and an arena is virtually empty, you have two choices. You either take it out on the people who are there, which is insane, but I've seen it happen, or you go out and be the best damn band you can so that next time they bring their friends back. So that next time they go, wow, you should have seen Kiss. So, you know, I've seen bands shoot themselves in the foot, you know. Why take it out on the people who bought tickets?
I've seen it with comedians, too.
Yeah.
They come on and they go, oh, look at this shit crowd. Last night I did 5,000 people.
Yeah,
Like, well, don't blame them.
Hey, thank you for coming. And you're going to get your money's worth. So I think we've always been cut from a different cloth, and that's probably why we're still around.
Priest was an opener on some of the Creatures, or the Dynasty tour, and that's right on Unleashed in the East, which is one of the greatest live records, probably inspired by Kiss Alive 1 and 2.
Well, they actually had our clothing people doing those red and black outfits they had. I saw Priest when what album was out? I think it was Stained Glass. Anyway, Stained Glass.
When they were the hippie band?
No. Rob came out. He had like a priest collar almost.
Oh yeah.
And a long like coat. They were friggin' awesome. But you know, then they kind of fine-tuned it and maybe changed it for more mass appeal. And yeah, when they were out with us, they got it. You know, they figured it out. They're terrific. Look, you know, we came up at a time where there were a lot of great bands around, and we were in a very enviable position of being able to bring out bands that we believed in. And our opening bands were Priest, AC/DC, Tom Petty, Bob Seger,
John Cougar
Mellencamp, Nugent, Bon Jovi, Motley Crue, you name them, they stood on stage. And I think to a man, if you speak to them, you'll always find out, Cheap Trick, that I believe strongly that if you have to tie your opponent's hand behind his back, or if you have to sabotage or handicap your opening act, then you need to go back and rehearse a little more. So the idea for us was always get these bands that we thought were great and let them go out and trial by fire. Go out there and be the best you can be, as opposed to you can go out there, but we're not going to give you lights, or we're
half the PA.
Yeah,
all
for
that
us
stuff.
it was like, go out there and kill them. You know, if you're that great, it'll only make us work that much harder. So, you know, we've had great opening acts, and many of them have gone on to, you know, heights that few get to navigate.
Yeah, the Creatures tour had Motley. I saw that, San Francisco Civic. I still am a guy who, after all these years, I love Creatures probably the most. I think it's a crazy heavy record. When you put it on, like Danger, these tunes are smashers.
Yeah.
Smashers, man.
Totally.
I couldn't believe the guy from Mr. Mister played the solo on on Creatures of the Night. I
Yeah.
thought for sure it was Vinnie Vincent because it's such a style of that.
It's such a-
you know.
He knocked that out of the park. Steve Farris was the guitar player. We were shell-shocked at how far we had fallen from grace. We were also shell-shocked to realize how far we had lost the plot. And we're determined to make a statement. And were we expecting to be embraced and taken back in by everybody immediately? No. But we needed to make a declaration. And Creatures was it. It's there's some great stuff on there.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. I mean, it is. It's just as heavy as anything that came out in the '80s, as far as like really, actually, super heavy for even Kiss.
Oh, total. Very much for us. I mean, it was songs that are on there. Keep Me Coming, Danger, Creatures, I Love It Loud, Saint and Sinner. A lot of great stuff. I Still Love You.
I Still Love You.
Yeah.
Smoking. Did you write that with somebody else?
I wrote that with Vinnie.
Oh, Vinnie Vincent.
Yeah.
Man, what a strange cat, Vinnie Vincent.
Yes, I will agree.
It's pretty bizarre what that guy's life. I loved Vinnie Vincent. I loved him in the band. He had that gold Jackson Randy Rhodes. There he was, killing it. He had the onk. I was like, this is crazy. To me, it was just like, this is just the next level. Here we go. And pretty bizarre where it's gone.
I concur.
I wanted to get into, I know you love, I just listened to your R&B stuff that's about
Soul
to come
Station.
out, and it is fantastic.
Thank you.
And I absolutely love R&B music. I love what I call soul rock. I really, really loved Terrence Trent D'Arby.
It's great.
One
Boy,
of the greatest live guys I've ever seen live.
guy imploded, let me tell you.
Yep.
The guy snatched defeat from victory, you know, I mean, but I saw him live and he was just great. I mean, he was great. Unfortunately, he thought he was greater. I don't quite get it, but seemed to sabotage his own career. But yes, Terrence Trent D'Arby,
that kind
great.
of stuff, you know, even like Maxwell,
Maxwell's
D'Angelo.
totally.
Oh, killer.
Totally.
Just
Maxwell,
great stuff.
D'Angelo, awesome.
How about St. Paul and the Broken Bones?
Totally. It's all great stuff. I mean, you know, it's when it's done well, man, it's killer. I'm thrilled to be able to do this music with Soul Station and have this amazing band of people who have played with everyone from Whitney Houston to Natalie Cole to Christina Aguilera to Pink to John Mayer, the Temps, everybody. There's a need for that music to be out there. The Four Tops, the Spinners, the Stylistics, the OJs, Blue Magic, the Delphonics, the list goes on and on and on.
Temptations.
Yeah.
Even when you get into the 70s of Earth, Wind, and Fire, that stuff is just the next level of it that blows my mind. Lakeside, all this
totally.
stuff.
Cameo.
Cameo.
You know.
I mean,
Yeah.
come on.
You know, Isley Brothers.
Oh.
You know, there's
Gap
just...
Band.
Yeah, totally. You had these amazing writers. Interesting, let's see, Norman Whitfield and Holland Dozier Holland and Tom Bell and Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff and Willie Mitchell, all these people who were responsible for all this great music either coming out of Memphis or Philly or Detroit. It's amazing.
It's crazy what they created. To be able to just be like a song machine like that. They go to work each day. Here's 5 songs. And then they come on and you're like, what? You guys just wrote all these?
Yeah,
Like
crazy.
as a job every day. It was just in them.
Yeah.
You can't even get some people a band with 1 song on their record.
Well, the beauty too was that songwriters were competing for places on albums and with artists. So, as I was saying earlier, in the Brill Building, in New York, you had cubby holes with these teams of writers trying to write the next song for the Righteous Brothers, or trying to write the next song for Eric Burdon and the Animals, and that's what you did all day. You wrote. Pretty amazing. I was looking last night at a bunch of Little Anthony and the Imperials songs, and all their hits were written by a guy who had some hits on his own, a guy named Teddy Randazzo, and a couple of co-writes. But anyway, to write songs like Hurt So Bad and On the Outside Looking In, and just wild. Yeah, songwriting. It's an art.
It is an art.
It's I've said to some people, I go, anybody can write a song, but that doesn't make you a songwriter.
Yeah, that's right.
Songwriting is something that you work at for a long time.
Look at that run Desmond Child had. Holy smokes, huh?
Yeah, Des is from the time I met him, the second song we wrote, I think, was I Was Made for Loving You. And then at some point in the 80s, I turned John and Richie onto Desmond, and what comes out? Slippery.
Crazy.
Slippery and Wet. And then Des just took off and wrote amazing things for everybody. So, yeah, Desmond's amazing. Diane Warren. Diane can write hit songs like other people can turn a faucet on. I mean, there's a lot of talent out there.
Yeah, Linda Perry. She wrote tons of crushing songs.
Yeah, there's some great stuff out there. Hey, Post Malone. Post Malone's doing some pretty cool stuff. There's interesting stuff. Billie Eilish's brother, who pretty much writes and produces her stuff. That there is stuff out there that's really interesting. But it runs the gamut. It's not limited to any one genre. A lot of cool stuff. There's Ariana Grande. There's a lot of stuff there that I think is very, very cool.
Well, if you hear a great song and it's stuck in your head, immediately you kind of go like, wow, what made it stick in my head? It's usually the big hook, some kind of smoking chorus, or a dropped-in line that just sticks in your head forever.
Yeah, I mean, Adele's great.
Fantastic.
She's the modern Dusty Springfield. Everything has roots in something else.
I love watches, and I know you like watches, but
today
I'm not wearing one. You're not wearing one.
I'll tell you the funniest thing. I was with Eric a couple of days ago, and Eric is not only a watch lover, but he's a expert and an aficionado. Eric was on the board that picks in Zurich, Geneva, the watch of the year. I mean,
is that right?
Oh yeah, Eric knows more about watches than some of the companies that he goes to visit. So anyway, a couple of days ago, same thing happened, and he looked at me and goes, "Where's your watch?" Because we always wear watches, and I said, "I didn't wear one today." He goes, "He just figured I forgot it, in a dressing room or wherever." So yeah, it's very strange not to have a watch.
What are you into?
It's got a tick.
Yep.
Take a look at it.
Are you into APs?
Yeah.
Of course, Rolex. That's the gateway. It's like Rolex is the kiss of watches.
What's interesting, Rolex, comes and goes, but it ultimately comes back around.
It does.
Yeah, Rolexes are...
They're killing it now.
Yeah, I'm more into the aesthetics of the watches. The complications, I don't really understand, but I think watches are great accessories. And funny that nowadays, a lot of people don't see a necessity in a watch because your phone and everything else tells you the time. But to me, it's like, yeah, but it's not a watch. A watch is a piece of jewelry.
Yeah.
So I I'm always looking for another good one. But there's loads of watches around.
What's your favorite piece?
I have a rose gold Daytona that I like a lot.
Very cool.
And I've got a Seiko that I actually really like. It's it changes time. I mean, you have to press a bunch of buttons, but it works off something up there in outer space, a satellite or something.
No shit?
Yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
so it changes time and stuff. It was really weird. I had it in a drawer a couple of weeks ago, and I took it out, and all of a sudden, it came to life. The dial started going around, and it set itself. So that was pretty cool.
Whoa, that's nuts.
But a couple of cool IWCs, a big pilot, and I've got a Top Gun double chrono IWC, which is pretty cool. Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah.
Car guy?
Yeah, I like cars. I like the aesthetics of cars. When you have a car, this one goes 200 miles an hour. Where are you going to go 200 miles an hour? On the 405? Doubtful. So, it ultimately comes down to comfort and the look of the car. So I'm more taken with those things. I'll probably get I'll get a new Vet, the new one.
The mid-engine?
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. I always said, look, when America produces a good car, I'll buy it. And for a long time, the cars were crap. Cars are not anymore. There are a lot of competitive cars. So I think the stigma of American cars is gone at this point. And so I'll get one of those. And, there's some family cars, Escalades and things like that.
Yeah, good. Just machines to get you around.
Hey, if you're going to get into an accident, you better be in the car that's going to win the accident. Yeah.
I heard that you are the guy that designs the stages.
I have input a lot of times in some of the stages I've designed, album covers and outfits and stuff like that. But this last stage, the end of the road stage, really was done by some other people.
What about that Kiss Alive 2? That's got to be the greatest stage ever made.
Kiss Alive 2,
The gold stairs.
Yeah.
That's the best. When the drum kit goes up, it's the cats.
Totally. That was a work of art for the time. And interestingly, when you look at the gateway, the fold-out picture on Kiss Alive 2, funny thing about that is that wasn't an actual shot from the show. That was done in the afternoon. And what we did is we did everything at once. So in essence, that photo is every effect that happened in the show. So we're up in the air, the flames are going off, the bombs are going off, the drums are up. But again, hey, that photo said to everybody, top this.
Yeah.
And the answer was, you can't. And I have to say, with the end of the road, I feel the same way. Top this. It sets another level. Look, at this point, anybody with money can have a Kiss show. A lot of bands out there, a lot of solo acts, but you can't be Kiss. And we could play on those stages, but they can't play on our stage. Our stage really has an identity, whereas most of the stages that are out now are nice to look at, but they're generic. They don't have an identity. They're just based upon a certain set of mechanical pieces that are interchangeable. Kiss stage, there's no other stage like ours. Right now, there's no other show like ours. And so it should be, because it's the last time around, and it should be definitive, and it should underline the fact that there's nobody like us, and there will never be anybody like us.
This really going to be it? This is really it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is the end of touring. It's it's not like it is for other bands. If I was wearing the clothes I'm wearing today, I could do it in my 90s.
Right. Sneakers.
Yeah.
Shorts.
Sure. Well, no shorts.
Yeah. No
But,
shorts on stage, right?
No shorts on stage. That's a no-no. But, to be out there with 40 pounds of gear, running around, forget about sitting, running around and jumping around and, throwing yourself around, you can't do that forever. It's a testament to us that we can do it now, but we're also aware that we can't do it forever. And before we reach that point, why not go out and celebrate what we are as opposed to what we once were? So, yeah, it's a conscious decision, because we could finish a tour and next year have someone go, you want to go tour? And we would go, no. And maybe another year would go by. Before you know it, you wouldn't have the...
You're 70.
Yeah.
Putting on boots, paint, flying around.
Or just going, no, I'm not going to do it. And then you kind of fade away. I don't want to fade away.
Yeah.
I want to blow shit up and celebrate with all the people that have known us over the years, and also the people who didn't. I want everybody to have a night where we have a victory lap and a celebration of everything that we've accomplished together.
What are you going to do with all the stuff at the Kiss warehouse? Are you going to one day have a big, giant, crazy sale and just sell it all?
Yeah, we're going to have a yard sale. We're gonna have a yard. We'll put it all out with no.
I mean, I look at your Instagram. It's cool. You'll crack something open. You'll be like, look at this from '84. I'll be like, wow.
Yeah. It's always fun. One of the more recent ones were all those crazy tights I wore in the 80s with bicycle reflectors and all this stuff. So we did have an auction once in the 90s. I don't think I can't imagine we'll do that again. But we do have a lot of cool stuff, a lot of great stuff.
You got to do something with it, right?
I don't know. I guess so. I don't even know. I don't know where we're playing, next month. So for me to be worrying about what I'm going to do with an old costume, I don't know. Yeah. We'll see.
I still am blown away. I remember the day you guys did the MTV makeup takeoff.
That was funny. It was funny because in the scheme of things, you have to remember that two of the guys there had only worn makeup for a short time, if that.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like we found a way to get publicity for something that may not have been as big a deal as it came off.
It was a big deal, though.
It was.
Like people, we gathered around a house. There's like 7 of us. Like, come over, man. They're taking the makeup off, and it was a big deal.
It was, and we had the Lick It Up video. So
great record.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a fun time.
You can't even imagine that could never happen now, even with Slipknot or Ghost. With the cameras and everything.
Well, look what happened with Ghost. I mean, you just can't
do it.
You can't do it. Something's going to happen and make it impossible to keep that anonymity.
I think back to that National Enquirer photo that they put out. It actually was you guys, but nobody saw you, so you just like, yeah, maybe it is.
Right. There was no verification or validating. So yeah, it just kind of fell by the wayside.
I can't thank you enough for doing the show. It's pretty mind-blowing to me, absolutely, to be here sitting with you 40 years later, busting my ass, and you become number 500. I've done this thing 8 years.
Wow.
Hundreds and hundreds of hours, all on my own, with some friends that help once in a while, like Jason helping with this, and it's an absolute honor to have you on, and I did try to ask questions where, I know you've been asked everything, and it's got to drive you crazy, and doing interviews at this point in your career, it's like, oh God, really? But to do it, I can't thank you enough.
My pleasure.
And
look what you've done. 500 of these. So,
500.
Yeah. So, you
At 53 years old, I started at 40 something, and I'm like, I'm going to do a podcast. And I didn't know. I don't have a publicist. I don't have an agent, a manager getting me guests. It's like seeing you at the pizza place. Dude, want to do the podcast? I mean, you got to hear that all the time,
Well, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad we got a chance to talk.
I can't thank you enough. And so when does the new record, The Soul Review, come out?
Don't know. We're just trying to plan. Things. We want to do a lot of stuff to promote it, and it's worthy of it. I think anybody who hears it is pretty blown away.
It absolutely knocked me out, and I'm such a fan of that music. So I was just sitting there going like, wow, this is great. And I thought immediately came to mind was Robert Plant. Like, yeah, I did Zeppelin, but I like other stuff. I like bluegrass. I like blues.
Well, you reach a point where you have to reassess what you are today versus what you were 20 years ago, 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And I've always considered myself, I'm not a rock singer. I'm a singer who sings rock. I said the same thing when I did Phantom of the Opera. I don't do one thing because that's all I can do. I love music. I'm a singer, and there are certain things that connect with me, and that's what I want to do. I'm not here to champion, the rock and roll crusade or anything like that. I'm not the spearhead of a movement. I'm a singer.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And when's the Kiss? It's on and off right now. When does it pick back up?
Kiss Cruise is just coming up, and then right after that, we're off to Australia, Japan, then America again, then South America, then Europe. It's a big world out there.
It is a big world. It's a big, long farewell. I still think about that Brazil show when you guys were down in the U.S. And you go play that, and there's like 1 million people.
It was pretty amazing.
That footage is great. All right, there you guys go. The man right there, number 500 with Paul Stanley. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. See ya.